It wasn't just one person. It wasn't a careless mistake or a misunderstood moment. It was all of them, one by one, thread by thread, unraveling every illusion I had about loyalty, love, and truth. But when I found out, I didn't scream. I didn't throw things or demand answers. I just stood still and I listened to the silence. Have you ever had that moment where the world around you doesn't explode, but instead falls into a stillness so sharp, so clear, it slices right through your soul? That's what it felt like. No one confesses. Not unless they're caught. And even then, most people lie more. But I wasn't looking for confessions. I wasn't desperate for apologies. What I felt in that moment wasn't rage. It was something deeper. A shift. A pulling away. Like something inside me quietly packed its bags and began to leave. Not the room, but the entire life I thought I was living. It happened on an ordinary Wednesday. The kind of day that smells like routine and sounds like nothing special. The coffee was bitter, my inbox full, and the world spinning as usual. But there was something in the way my best friend hesitated before answering a simple question. Something about how my partner's phone flipped down when I walked in the room. Something too polished in my sister's overly sweet tone. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. We all do that, don't we? We talk ourselves out of our own instincts just to protect the image of peace we've built. But instincts don't lie. People do. One by one, I began to observe. Not accuse. Not pry. Just notice. And noticing changed everything. A missed detail here. A repeated story with slightly different wording. A deleted message that left a ghost of suspicion behind. I didn't want to believe it, because when the people you love lie to you, it's not just betrayal. It's identity theft. They steal your version of reality, and when the truth hits, you don't just lose them, you lose the you that trusted them. But still, I stayed quiet.
Why?
Why didn't I say something the moment I knew? Because confrontation gives power to the other person. It gives them a stage, a spotlight, a script. And I didn't want to watch anyone act anymore. I'd seen enough of their rehearsed lines and twisted performances. I wanted to see what they did when they thought no one was watching. That's when the truth became clearer. Not just who was lying.
But why?
It wasn't just about hiding secrets. It was about control, about insecurity, about the fear of being seen completely, and the cowardice to face the consequences. So I let them lie. Yes, I knew. Yes, I was hurt. But no, I wasn't going to fall into their drama. Instead, I became still, observant, focused. I began making notes, not on paper but in my mind. Every lie became a red flag. Every excuse a warning sign. And the more I listened, the louder their dishonesty became. Some might say I was being passive, that I should have demanded answers. But here's the truth. Confrontation isn't always power. Sometimes detachment is. Sometimes knowing the truth and choosing silence is the loudest thing you can do. And in that silence, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't beg for loyalty. I wouldn't expose their lies to force guilt. I wouldn't even tell them I knew. I would let the truth sit with me and let it burn quietly, beautifully, into a resolve they would never see coming. My name is Alina. Not the kind of name people remember immediately, but the kind that stays with them after the room is quiet. I wasn't born bold. I wasn't raised to expect betrayal. In fact, I was the one everyone leaned on. The listener. The fixer. The one who forgave a little too quickly and gave chances even when none were deserved. Growing up, I learned early on that love is earned. That if you're just good enough, people won't leave. So I spent years being more than good. I was reliable, kind, present. The friend who always replied, the sister who forgave the harsh words, the partner who swallowed her doubts in favor of peace. My world was built on carefully tended relationships. Each one of them mattered to me deeply. My best friend Zara had been in my life since college. We survived breakups, lost jobs, and family drama together. She knew every version of me, even the broken ones. Then there was Rayhan, my partner of 3 years. Quiet, brilliant, and emotionally guarded in a way that made me want to dig deeper. And my younger sister, Mehak. Fierce, impulsive, but loyal, or so I believed. They were my circle. And I never imagined that the ones I held closest would be the ones to chip away at my trust, together, simultaneously, and silently. To understand why their betrayal shook me, you'd have to know what I'd already survived. At 23, I lost my mother. Not to illness or accident, but to a sudden heart attack that ripped her from our lives in one breath. She was the only person who never lied to me. Her honesty was raw and sometimes sharp, but it was pure. Losing her taught me that life is cruel, but people are supposed to cushion that blow. That's what I expected from those I loved. After her death, I changed. I became someone who appreciated silence, who stopped chasing chaotic friendships, who loved stability and quiet loyalty. I learned to find comfort in routines, morning coffee in the same mug, predictable messages from loved ones, check-ins that became sacred rituals. Rayhan entered my life during one of my most guarded phases. He was different, not loud, not romantic in the traditional sense. He showed love in his own calculated, logical way, fixing things around the house, remembering tiny details I shared once, being present without asking for too much. Zara was the wild balance, spontaneous, emotional, and forever planning impulsive road trips or pushing me into adventures I'd never choose on my own. She was the fire to my calm, the extrovert who pulled me out of my quiet shell. I trusted her more than I trusted my own reflection. And Mehak? She was blood. That unshakable bond you believe can never fracture. Sure, we fought, siblings do, but I always believed there was a line she would never cross. A loyalty rooted not in words, but in shared history. But maybe that was the problem. Rayhan. She doesn't know anything yet. She's too trusting. That's her flaw. My fingers trembled, but I didn't cry. Not yet. There's a point beyond heartbreak where tears become irrelevant, where shock steals even the privilege of feeling. I locked the phone and placed it back. When he walked out of the shower, smiling at me like nothing was wrong, I smiled back. Because now I had proof. And with proof comes power. But instead of confronting them, I did something else. Something far more unsettling. I watched. Over the next few days, I became the quiet observer of my own life. Every message, every shift in tone, every canceled plan. I studied it like a puzzle. And the more I watched, the more the lies became obvious. Zara would drop by with coffee for just a chat, but her eyes would dart every time I mentioned Rayhan. Her hugs felt shorter. She asked fewer questions about my relationship, and when she did, it felt rehearsed, like checking a box. Rayhan, too, began slipping. He would fumble through stories, change timelines, mention places we were supposedly together when I knew I wasn't there. I stopped correcting him. I let him create a maze of lies. Because I already knew the way out. Then came Mehak. One night, I overheard her on a call. She was in the living room, assuming I was asleep upstairs. Her voice was hushed, her words fast and sharp. Alina's not stupid. She's figuring it out. I told you to be careful. No, I'm not getting involved. This is between you and her. But I'm not lying for you anymore, Zara. The call ended quickly. She never saw me standing at the stairs, listening, staring. So there it was. The triangle was complete. Zara and Rayhan were involved. Mehak knew. And I was the fool everyone thought was too kind to connect the dots. But they underestimated something vital. Kindness is not weakness. Silence is not ignorance. And forgiveness? That's not forgetfulness. I began planning. Not revenge. That would be too easy. No, I wanted them to see themselves. I wanted to hold up a mirror so clean, so unforgiving, that they'd flinch at their own reflection. I started with Zara. One afternoon, I invited her over for tea. She smiled nervously, probably sensing my calm demeanor had shifted into something unreadable. I asked her questions. Innocent ones.
About work. About life.
Then I casually said, sometimes people lie so smoothly, they forget who they're lying to. She froze. Her spoon clinked a little too hard against the cup. But she didn't respond, just smiled. Tightly, unevenly. I leaned in. And sometimes, the ones being lied to let the liar speak, just to see how deep the hole gets. Still, no direct confrontation. Just enough to plant fear. To make her wonder. Then came Rayhan. I changed my routine. Became colder. Less available. I started dressing differently. Started smiling to myself more often when I was alone. It drove him mad. He asked questions. Everything okay? Yeah, I'd say. Why wouldn't it be? He began feeling the shift. And guilty men? They hate feeling powerless. They crave control. But when I refused to react, he panicked. That panic? That was my power. I started journaling openly, leaving notes visible on the kitchen table. One read. You can only fake love for so long before it rots you from the inside. Another. I'm not afraid of the truth. I'm afraid of wasting more time with lies. He saw them. He never asked. Mehak was the last piece. She wasn't directly involved in the betrayal, but she chose silence. And silence in the face of truth? That's a form of betrayal too. I invited her for a walk one evening. The sun was setting, a soft golden glow stretching across the horizon, like light trying to break through darkness. I heard your phone call, I said quietly. She didn't respond right away. Her face tightened. I didn't lie to you, she said finally. I just didn't know how to tell you. You didn't have to tell me. You just had to not protect them. Her silence said everything. I turned to her. I don't hate you, Mehak. But I need you to understand. You watched me bleed and walked away from the wound. That was the last time we spoke meaningfully. Things escalated soon after. Zara started distancing herself. Rayhan became more irritated, more anxious. They were sensing the storm but didn't know where or when it would land. So I gave them time. Let the unease simmer. And then, I did something none of them expected. I invited them all for dinner.
Zara.
Rayhan. Mehak. No special occasion. No birthday. Just a gathering. A final act before the curtain dropped. The table was set beautifully. Candles. Soft music. Everything warm and inviting. I cooked all their favorite dishes. The air was filled with nostalgia and tension. They didn't know I knew, but they knew something was coming. I served the food, smiled, engaged in small talk. And then, when the silence stretched just enough, I looked each one of them in the eye. I know, I said. No raised voice. No dramatic outburst. Just truth, dropped like a stone in still water. Zara gasped. Mehak looked away. Rayhan opened his mouth, but no words came. I know about the messages. The phone calls. The secrets. I stood up slowly, placing a folded paper in front of each of them. Screenshots. Dates. Transcripts. Cold, undeniable evidence. Their faces shifted, from fear to shame to something uglier. Exposure.
I didn't yell.
I didn't accuse. I just said, you didn't just lie to me.
You lied about me.
You believed I was too soft to see it, too fragile to hold the truth. But I carried it in silence until it no longer broke me. Then I walked away. No explanations. No reactions needed. Because the damage wasn't just in what they did, it was in how they justified it. That dinner was my goodbye. Not out loud, not final, but internal. The moment I freed myself from the weight of people who saw my love as a weakness. And in that silence that followed, I felt powerful.
Free.
Unapologetically whole. Because instead of confronting them in anger, I confronted them with truth. And truth, when delivered without warning, cuts deeper than any scream ever could. The aftermath of truth is rarely neat. People assume that once you expose a lie, everything falls into place, like justice unfolds neatly and people apologize, cry, and change. But the real aftermath? It's quiet, uncomfortable, chaotic in slow motion. The night after the dinner, no one called. No one texted. Silence filled every corner of the house. It wasn't painful silence. It was peaceful. Not because things were okay, but because I was okay. Something had shifted in me. For so long, I thought peace came from keeping things together, from holding on. But now, I realized peace sometimes comes from letting everything fall apart. The next morning, I packed a bag. I didn't leave forever, but I left long enough to remember who I was without the noise of betrayal clouding my mind. I went to my aunt's farmhouse outside the city. The place was surrounded by trees, with wind that whistled like secrets being set free. And for the first time in months, I slept deeply. No dreams. No anxiety. Just rest. While I was gone, the world I'd left behind began unraveling. Zara tried to reach out. She sent long texts full of apologies, justifications, confusion, and finally, guilt. She claimed it just happened, that it wasn't planned, that she didn't want to hurt me. But every sentence screamed one truth. She wanted what I had, until she broke it. Rayhan, too, reached out. He came by the house, rang the bell, left notes on the door. Said he made a mistake. Said he didn't realize what he was losing. Said I was the only person who truly saw him. But by then, I had already stopped wanting to be seen by people who only notice my absence, not my presence. And Mehak? She never reached out. Maybe guilt swallowed her. Or maybe she never felt brave enough to face the mirror I held up to her soul. Regardless, I didn't chase any of them. Because healing is not about dragging people back. It's about walking forward, lighter, wiser, stronger. During those days in the farmhouse, I rediscovered the version of me that existed before the lies. I painted again, read poetry, sat under the stars. I remembered how much I loved silence, not the silence of secrets, but the silence of peace. One night, I stood under the sky, looking up at the constellations. The wind brushed against my skin like a divine whisper, and I felt something unexpected. Gratitude. Not for the betrayal, not for the heartbreak, but for the clarity it forced upon me. It was as if God had allowed everything to shatter, so I could finally rebuild with intention, with wisdom, and with eyes that could now see through masks. And then came the letter. A handwritten envelope slipped under the door of my aunt's home one afternoon. No name. No return address. Just my name in Rayhan's handwriting. I opened it. Inside were 3 pages, messy, tear-stained, written like a confession. He wrote of confusion, of weakness, of how Zara came into his life at a time when he felt emotionally disconnected, how she made him feel understood, how it wasn't love, just escape, how he saw my strength as a threat, not realizing it was the very thing keeping him afloat. He ended with a sentence I'll never forget. You were the lighthouse, and I mistook your stillness for abandonment, not realizing you were the only one guiding me back to safety. I folded the letter. Read it once, then again, and then I burned it, not out of anger, but because I knew some closures aren't found in holding on. They're found in letting go. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconnection. Sometimes, forgiveness is simply the act of releasing the story so it doesn't define your future. When I returned home a week later, everything felt different. The home was the same, but I wasn't. The pictures of Rayhan and me? I removed them. Not out of spite, but because I didn't want reminders of someone who didn't know how to honor love. The gifts Zara had given me over the years? Packed away. Because no matter how pretty something is, if it's built on deceit, it doesn't deserve a place in your sanctuary. Slowly, I rebuilt my space. But more importantly, I rebuilt me. I started therapy, joined a writing circle, reconnected with people I had unintentionally pushed away while I was drowning in that toxic triangle. I stopped explaining my story to people who didn't earn the right to hear it. I learned to say no, to take up space, to exist boldly, without guilt. Then something beautiful happened. One evening, while walking through a local art gallery, I met someone.
Not in a movie-like dramatic way.
It was subtle,
Serene.
We reached for the same book in the gallery's corner shelf, an old poetry collection. He smiled. I smiled back. His name was Ayan, a photographer.
Quiet.
Thoughtful. The kind of soul that doesn't rush words, but means every one of them. We talked for hours. About art. about healing, about scars that don't hurt anymore but remind us we've survived. There was no flirtation, no pretense, just presence. And that presence? It felt like home. He didn't ask about my past, not right away. And I didn't offer. Because for once, I wanted to be known for who I was becoming, not for who I had to survive. Over time, Ayan and I grew close.
Not fast.
Not with expectations, but with gentleness. He never tried to fix me. He just walked with me. And that's the kind of love I didn't even know I deserved. One day, while we were walking by the lake, he looked at me and said, "You carry storms like stories, quietly, gracefully. It's brave how you still choose to dance under the sky." I smiled, not because I needed the validation, but because I knew I had finally become the woman who doesn't just survive betrayal, she transforms through it. Life doesn't come with a manual. It certainly doesn't come with a guide for handling betrayal or the silent heartbreak that follows. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the deepest lessons, the ones that carve us into who we are, come from moments that shake our foundation, when trust breaks, when people we love disappoint us, and when silence speaks louder than confrontation ever could. I caught them lying. But instead of chasing after answers, accusations, or revenge, I chose my own peace. What if that's the real victory? What if sometimes the most powerful response isn't confrontation, but quiet strength? There is a courage in walking away, not because you're weak, but because you're wise enough to know when to stop fighting battles that only drain your soul. When I didn't confront, I didn't give them power over my emotions. I reclaimed myself. And in doing so, I found a truth far more valuable than any apology or explanation. You are not defined by other people's lies or their choices. You are defined by how you choose to rise afterward. So I ask you now, what will you do the next time you catch someone lying? Will you confront them and demand answers? Will you silently hold on to the pain? Or will you, like me, choose to step back, find your peace, and let the story unfold without your constant presence? Sometimes the greatest act of love we can give ourselves is the permission to let go. Because in letting go, we make space for healing,
For growth.
for a future where we don't just survive, we thrive. The truth will always come out. And when it does, may you have the courage to listen, the strength to heal, and the grace to move forward, on your own terms and in your own time. Remember, you deserve honesty, respect, and peace. Not just from others, but from yourself. What story will you choose to live?